Are we live?
Yes, we are. I think so.
Oh, I was waiting for the countdown and then I just saw you are live. Good evening, everyone. Um, my name is Peter Boon. Some of you may have seen me before. I am a cozy mystery author. With me tonight, doing his first ever author chat, is Ben Westwood, who is a fellow Eastbourne author. His first book came out a few weeks ago, and the two of us are going to be talking about our books and our author careers in the hour this evening. So, Ben, if you'd just like to say hello and introduce yourself.
Yes, hi everybody. My name is Ben Westwood. I've just released my debut novel, which is called Green Shoots, which is an eco thriller, is what an agent dubbed it. I hadn't heard that expression before, but I thought I'd go with it. I mean, it's basically a crime thriller with an ecological theme. So it's been out for about 3 weeks now, and it's going quite well.
Yeah, it's been getting some great reviews, hasn't it?
Yes, it has. Yeah, it's won an award from the US from Artisan Book Reviews, and I've been getting plenty of good reviews on Amazon and Goodreads, both in the UK and the US, which is really nice. They're not just my friends; these reviews, these are also people I've never met before. So, which is the real test. If only your friends and family like it, then. That's the least you can expect, isn't
Yeah,
it?
I remember when I first launched a couple of years or so ago, and the first time I saw a review from a stranger, I was like so happy. It's a brilliant feeling, isn't it? The first ones that you get.
Yeah, it is. It is definitely.
Just before we go any further, Ben, have you just got your book there just to show everyone the front cover so they know it if they see it around online or if they see it posted in this group or anything?
Yeah, there's green shoots, as you can see. The main image is green shoots with blood dripping off it, which I thought exemplified the book pretty well. That's also from a scene in the book, and the back cover is actually a real contrast to that. There's a mural in the book which basically has a scene of devastation on one side and regrowth on the other side.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so yeah, I'm pleased with the cover. I'm getting good feedback on the cover actually. I mean, it's slightly unusual for a thriller because it's so green. Obviously, the blood is quite standard for a thriller, but
Yeah. Did
yeah.
you want to just tell us a little bit about the basic plot and what it's about then, Ben?
Yeah, so the basic plot is the main character John is determined to solve the mystery of his wife's death, but he gets drawn into a conspiracy. He starts off very depressed and in a bad way, and he receives a mysterious phone call at the beginning of the book telling him that not everything was as it seems with his wife Christina's death in South America. He thought that she died of a tropical disease, but he's told by a man on the phone who claims to be a private investigator that that's not actually what happened, and he needs to look into it. Um, but this private investigator starts feeding John clues about his wife and also asks him to look into a series of deaths in London. So there are two investigations that John, who is a crime journalist, ends up undertaking, both into what happened to his wife, but also these deaths in London. And at the outset, we don't really know what the connection is. We know that they're connected to the rainforest
Yeah.
somehow because they're executives who work in industries that typically plunder the rainforest, such as oil and timber and cattle. um, and yeah, so I mean, things do converge in the middle of the book. Obviously, I'm not going to give too much away,
No, of
um,
course.
but yeah, so it sort of goes from there. And there's very much a sort of a global story in a way, and there's also the personal story of John trying to get through his own grief while investigating what happened.
One of the things I loved about your book when I first heard about it is that that exciting premise, and I think kind of a premise to draw people in is so important in any kind of books that we read, and just that idea of the guy who's grieving his wife suddenly gets this phone call to say that it could in fact be murder. I think that's a brilliant kind of way into the story. I just wondered how you kind of came up with the story. Did you have that kind of big premise first and then the rest of it developed, or did you have like the whole idea? I just wondered how you came up with that idea and that premise.
Well, I had the idea of the man because he starts off on the edge of the cliff, on the edge of Beachy Head, about to drive off,
Yeah,
which is, as you know, is very close to where we live. Beachy Head has always sort of loomed large. I think it does over anybody who lives in Eastbourne. We're all very aware that Beachy Head is a very tragic place for a lot of people in the local area. And I had this idea in my head of the man who's about to drive off the cliff, and then something stops him from doing that for quite a while. And yeah, I mean, I like stories that begin dramatically and draw you in straight away. I like to be hit between the eyes by a
yeah,
story.
yeah, yeah.
I don't like it to take 50 pages to get going. I'm quite impatient, and I think that's definitely reflected in the way I write. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think, and a lot of people like the crime genre. I think for both reading and writing it for that reason, because you're more than other genres. You're kind of straight into an exciting premise, aren't you? And just to say for anyone that isn't kind of near our local area, Ben and I both live in Eastbourne, and you probably heard of Beachy Head, but Beachy Head is the UK's sadly most used suicide spot and the third biggest suicide spot in the whole world. I mean, it's beautiful cliffs, and my books, which I'll talk about a bit later, are set in an imagined little village in between those cliffs. But of course, as Ben says, it does obviously attract great tragedy. But as a crime writer, that does kind of give a great premise for some exciting plots. In two of my books, I've used Beachy Head and the prospect of suicide at Beachy Head in two of my books, and I think it's good when books use their local area as well. But other than that, it isn't really kind of set locally. You kind of go all over the place, don't you, within your plot in terms of setting?
Yes, I mean the main character actually lives in South London, and he was married to a lady from Ecuador. So the the book is set mainly in London, and then there's large portions of it, both from memory, because his wife actually had a blog, and we read a lot of her blog posts from when she was
Yeah,
working in environmental issues over in South America. And then there is a portion of the book where he goes over to South America later to investigate what happened. So, you do get the contrast between the big city world and the sort of wilds of the rainforest, and that was deliberate actually. And it's been a few, because I lived in South America for 5 or 6 years, so quite a long time, and I was a travel writer writing about countries like Ecuador and Peru, but I haven't actually been out there for quite a few years. And I wrote this book over lockdown, so it was obviously impossible.
yeah.
um, and I found it was actually really nice to go there in my mind, and also because I'd lived there for so long, it was actually quite easy to go there in my mind, and that was nice, really.
Yeah, God, your books have got so much more glamorous settings than mine have. How did you find, because you were writing from places you've been, like from memory, were you relying kind of on memory mainly, or did you have to kind of do research again to remind yourself of these places?
Because I actually wrote a travel guide to Ecuador, I knew there are scenes in the capital Quito, and then there's scenes in some of the jungle towns, and then in the jungle itself. And because I know those places pretty well, and obviously because it's fiction, you can paint the picture that you want to, as long as it's close to reality. I think
Yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah.
um, Yeah, I mean, it actually was a lot easier than I thought it was. I was a bit nervous about when I was starting the South America sections because, like I said, I haven't been there for a few years. But obviously, when you've lived there for that amount of time and done that amount of travel, it did actually turn out to be quite familiar.
The other thing I'm quite interested in is how did you find the transition from like non-fiction writing, like blogs and articles and so on, to writing a novel? Did you find it kind of much different or easier?
Um, well, I think what's important to note from the book is that there is a lot of my non-fiction writing in it
Oh, because you've
because
got the blog form of the
there's blog
writer's blog.
writing. There are some sections which are a little bit like travel writing, not for very long, but the descriptions of beautiful places,
Yeah,
going to the
yeah,
jungle. There's a scene where they meet in the Ecuadorian highlands, which is almost like a dream because it's a memory. And also because John is a crime journalist, it's punctuated by crime articles, headlines, press conferences, all of which draw on my own experience because I used to
yeah,
be a journalist in London and used to work for the Nationals. So I think it was a case of harnessing what I'd done in nonfiction and then putting it in a fiction setting. But I mean, the great thing about fiction, of course, is you can make it up. So you can. What I felt I was doing was I would start with for example, with the problems in
yeah, yeah,
the
yeah,
rainforest. The real problems, looking at what industries are actually doing, and then create characters around that. Um, so the backdrop had to be factual, but obviously the events. Although there are several events in the novel that are based on real events. There's a shooting in South America that is based partly on something that happened to somebody I know.
yeah.
There's a scene where somebody gets chased by people threatening him, which is based on somebody I know. So, and I think because it deals with such important ecological themes, I wanted to keep it as realistic as possible in some ways.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, the whole scope of it sounds great. There's so much packed in there. Did you have any kind of issues like narrowing down your ideas with the story you wanted to tell?
I had issues with realizing that I was perhaps being overly ambitious with how much I wanted to cover, and also the fact that the book has two concurrent investigations. And as I was just explaining at the beginning, I was quite aware this is quite complicated. If it was just the man who wants to find out what happened to his wife, what happened to her, then that's actually quite simplistic in some ways. But because there's a whole other thing going on, other crimes going on, and that eventually converge, um, I think as a debut novel as well, I don't think I made things particularly easy for myself because I did weave quite a complicated web. I mean, I think it works, but
Yeah.
you know, um,
I don't think as authors we ever make it easy for ourselves. Any kind of authors watching will probably agree, but I think certainly for me in the process, everything just eventually ends up coming together, doesn't it? I think, and to me, it just as you're kind of rewriting and redrafting, I think what's meant to be in there for me just kind of feels right, and it kind of comes together.
and I knew where I wanted to end up. That was a good thing. I think I found the middle complicated, but I knew exactly how it was going to end. And
Yeah,
also, I knew because it starts off on the edge of the cliff in the depths of despair, I knew that generally I wanted the arc to be going upwards, obviously with bumps along the way.
yeah,
And with
because I
that,
suppose from that point of view, from a chap that's starting kind of on the brink of suicide and with his wife having previously died, it could sound quite depressing. But the way you've described it and your blurb and the premise you've described so far tonight, it doesn't sound like that. So I think you've managed to kind of avoid people thinking that it would sound kind of quite a down book. It sounds a really exciting book, actually.
it's It's supposed to go from despair to hope.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
As the mural, I mentioned there's a, I mean, I'm not sure if I could share this with you. No, I probably won't do that in this format. But there's a mural in the book which on the left is the scene of devastation that goes into the
yeah, yeah,
boat on
yeah,
the right, and that out of their ashes green shoots will grow, which gives the book its name. And I realized as I was writing it that I actually wanted that to permeate the entire book,
yeah,
and also John's journey from absolute despair to hopefully finding some kind of healing. Um, because yeah, I mean, people may not know, but that John's experience is actually sadly quite close to my own, because I married a lady from South America and I unfortunately lost her. There was nothing suspicious about it, but I realized that I used that as a starting point.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, when I was writing John's sort of internal dialogue about his feelings about what happened and trying to get through it, I was really writing about myself, which to begin with was a bit challenging. But after a while, I realized, well, actually, that's part of the process. And I think sometimes you create an avatar which is not quite you, but
yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah,
almost you. And John was just almost me. He was a British journalist like I am. He lost his wife. You know, he's not the same person, but I realized I could project a lot of things that I had experience of. But
And
yeah, it was.
do you think that
Sorry.
helps you as well, kind of having this kind of put into fiction and kind of using some of your own story in this story?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, I had a very positive comment from a blogger last week about how when she first saw the book was a male protagonist and he'd lost his wife, she drew a sort of sharp intake of breath and wondered whether it would be very typically a woe is me and moany and kind of self-indulgent and
Yeah,
because she says she's come across a lot of male characters like that, and she was relieved to see that actually he was doing a lot of inner work and kind of trying to move through his feelings and expressing them, and was not sort of doing that. So I was quite pleased to hear that, particularly from a woman.
I was going to say, is she saying that men like to moan?
uh, I mean, I'm not praising her very well. She expressed it very well, and based on her own experience of reading books with male protagonists that she said fell into that kind of trap. um, and I think, yeah, I think that's very important, because I mean, when I was first writing the book and I was on a course with Curtis Brown
Yeah,
in London, which I found very useful. And the tutor was saying, yes, write what you know, but don't use the book as therapy. And I think that's important. Don't don't try and get everything that you need to say about your own problems into the book. Um, so you have to
yeah,
try and
yeah. I
find
mean,
that balance.
um, on a kind of slightly related note, my third novel, Death in the Closet, is um, about an issue that I got quite a bit of interest in, about a gay Premier League footballer who comes out at the age of 25. And quite famously, there's no kind of openly gay footballers. Now, I only came out like myself, and I obviously not a footballer by any stretch of the imagination. I can barely do any exercise. But my point is that my own experience of coming out later, coming out at 25, I channel that into use some of that in the book. But generally in my writing, people who read it who know me say that they some people say they see me in Edward Crisp, who's the main character, or even in his sidekick Noah. But lots of people say they see bits of me in all the different characters. And I think I've spoken to other authors about this before, and it's quite interesting how, whether consciously or subconsciously, whether we put ourselves into our books or not, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I haven't read Death in the Closet, but it really got my attention that you'd written a book with the sort of LGBTQ theme. I mean, is that correct? That
Yeah,
is
yeah,
the
yeah,
main character. Yeah, and I think that's very interesting, and obviously it gives you an opportunity to express a lot of things that you have personal experience of.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's a balance to be struck between being totally immersed in expressing stuff that you need to express, and you harnessing that and using it in the fiction.
Yeah, I mean, I think all authors use real life to some degree, even though we all have that legal bit at the beginning of the books that say bears no resemblance to any people living or dead. I have confessed before that my first book, Who Killed Miss Finch, which is about a horrible head teacher who gets killed, is loosely based on a horrible head teacher I used to work for. But a trick that I've confessed before, if you want to use real life people, is to change something about them. So what I did was I changed the gender of the head teacher who I was killing off, and that can quite often be a good trick.
Yeah, I did start off with somebody very specific in mind for one of the bad guys in my book, and then
Yeah.
I ended up changing his age and his appearance a bit because I thought I don't want anybody thinking this is that particular person.
Yeah. Just while we're paused, we haven't done any comments yet, so I'm just reading a few of comments of some of the readers and book club members who are with us. Sam Brownlee said hello to us both. So Sam did a fantastic job setting this up and is behind the scenes, waiting in the wings in case we have any technical problems. Sam is just agreeing with what you said before, that she says it's definitely your book, Ben, definitely heads from despair to hope. And Sam also says that it's interesting about how non-fiction can be used in fiction. Yeah, I've started to integrate that a little bit as well. What I've started doing is I've had a couple of like local news articles, but posted online, and then I've kind of wrote the comments you would get after, like you would see in like Facebook comments. So that's the kind of trick I used a little bit, but I only kind of use it sparingly.
Yeah, I've just noticed a question from Donna. Hi, Donna. Did you set out to write an ecological thriller, or is that just how it turned out? It's a very good question, Donna, and I'm trying to think back to the summer of 2020 when I first started planning this book. I knew it was going to be a thriller. I knew that his wife had died out in the rainforest. So I suppose I didn't really think of it as ecological thriller, but yes, it was a thriller that had a lot of issues to do with the rainforest and deforestation. But until somebody actually said eco thriller to me, one of the agents at Curtis Brown said that. I thought I'd never heard that before.
Yeah, well, that question from Donna is actually something I'm really glad she's asked, because that's something I wanted to talk about tonight as well. And firstly, hello, Donna. I know you've met Donna on one of the other interview sites, and Donna's also a great help to us in the author community. So, hi, Donna, and thank you for your question. But what I wanted to talk about based on that was, how much do you think, in terms of you've been branded kind of an eco thriller, and mine are branded cozy mysteries, and I've got my own view on that in a minute. How much do you think we're kind of pigeonholed as authors into certain categories, and how much do you think the book ends up being that? So, would you, for example, would you set out to write an eco thriller next, or would the next book be different? I just wonder. I'm just interested to think how much as authors we stick to these kind of genre categories that we're placed in.
Um, I I think that I think I was very ambitious when I started writing this novel. Maybe too ambitious in some ways. Certainly didn't play it safe. Certainly wrote the book that I wanted to write. I knew it was definitely a crime thriller, but I think the eco theme and just looking at the cover, that's not your sort of classic thriller cover, really. Um, And when I did the research about it, I sort of discovered that trying to sort of market it and put it on Amazon as sort of eco, they don't even have an eco thriller
No, no, I
category.
don't think they do. No, that's a good point.
They don't. So, I mean, they have loads of subcategories of crime thrillers, such as, serial killers or murder mystery, or
Yeah,
they've even got a vigilante justice section. which would apply, which my book is in, because there is a vigilante in it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But when I look at the other books in that category, they're all very much sort of, the dark destroyer type thing.
yeah, yeah,
Um, so I don't think my book does snugly fit, and I think that's probably why I didn't have that much luck with major agents. I mean, from going into bookshops, particularly in supermarkets, there's a lot of, it's very homogenous, shall we say. There's a lot of stuff that all looks like the book next to it. And obviously Richard Osman is the big one at the moment that everybody seems to be trying to have their book in a similar category to, or if you think of James Patterson
yeah,
in the thriller market. Um, and
yeah.
so I don't think I made things very easy for myself by sort of challenging and stretching the genre, is how somebody put it.
Yeah, well, with Richard Osman, I mean, anyone that's seen me talk before, I've mentioned this before, but my book came out about 3 or 4 weeks before his, and I was very much in the position where you've just been in a few weeks ago, starting out for the first time, and not knowing kind of what success my book would have. And his book did come out after, but it was actually written in the same kind of subgenre of kind of like British cozy mystery with kind of elements of like traditional Agatha Christie style mystery. And one of the reasons I think my book took off in the first few months is it was actually getting recommended quite a lot on the Amazon page in terms of also boughts underneath Richard Osman. And I think part of the reason my book series did quite well is because it was in that genre, which just happened to be on trend. And I always kind of grumble to myself, because you are right in there have been quite a lot of that has influenced a lot of other kind of British cozy style mysteries with these red and white covers and so on, and kind of emphasizing the Britishness. And lots of those are great, but I do always kind of grumble to myself, thinking, I hope people realize when they read mine that mine came out a few weeks before his, and I've not just kind of copied that subgenre because it's popular at the minute.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I think it, if people who like something else also like your book, and that makes it successful, then great. I don't think people expect fiction to be inventing something new. I mean, obviously it has its own story, but do we want to be trying to start new genres or push boundaries of genres? I think I've tried to do that with my book, and I think maybe it's overly ambitious in some way. I think for my next one, I'm probably going to think more carefully about what the books that are very successful in the crime thriller genre. I certainly need to write a book that deals with important issues. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Um, so in some ways, maybe a sort of political thriller appeals to me. But it's interesting what you said about cozy mysteries. Before I started looking at book marketing, I'd never heard the phrase cozy mystery. You
Well,
know,
it kind of I think it kind of came from America at first, and a lot of the kind of Americanized cozy mysteries, if you look on Amazon, are they kind of really emphasize the cozy element. So you get kind of lots of animals and cakes and things like that. And the cozy subcategories are, as an example, are crafts and hobbies, culinary, and pets. So that kind of that they kind of came from that kind of Americanized, kind of really cute cozy mystery. And me and kind of lots of other kind of English authors come under that, but really what I would like is a more kind of traditional mystery category or a whodunit category. But it's interesting that like we all kind of have our books pigeonholed in certain genres, and a few people have very kindly in reviews said my book is kind of more than just that, and it's got humor in it. And in a couple of books, like I mentioned, Death in the Closet, like I've explored kind of slightly darker themes. I mean, what's great about being an indie author is that you get to, like you were saying about the agents maybe not picking up on your book with the eco thing. I'm really pleased that I have like my own choice to kind of write what I want, but I am also very aware as well that I need to sell books. I mean, I think I was very lucky with the Richard Osman thing, but I need to sell books and I want to market it in a certain way to attract existing readers of certain books. But I do feel as well, books more than kind of TV or movies, we are kind of pigeonholed into writing in certain genres, and it's just kind of finding your readers, isn't it? And lots of the readers who are in this group and watching this chat will tell you as well that firstly, there's lots of different subgenres within crime, and they don't all just read one. And lots of our readers, I know certainly Caroline, who's one of the admins, along with Sam, who also does the author interviews. Caroline reads lots of things that aren't crime, and I don't think readers just want to read one type of book, but we just have to be careful how we market them, I think, don't we?
We do, yeah. And I think the other thing that I think marks my book as a little different to much in the genre is that it's very emotional. My book is very emotional. The
Yeah,
protagonist wears his heart on his sleeve. And when I compare it with, say, Peter James, because in Peter James' book, the main character's wife has disappeared,
yeah,
but the way he treats it is not. It's not the same. It's not. There's not so much sort of anguish, and it's not so filled with emotion. And I find that thrillers can often be a little cold in some ways. That you've got a mystery and you've got an action hero, and that maybe what's happening inside the character's head in terms of the emotional turmoil. Sometimes that's not explored as much in the thriller genre. I don't know if I'm
yeah.
being
There's always
unfair
lots.
now. I don't know.
There's always lots of debate on that. I actually saw a post in UK Crime Book Club. I can't remember if it was yesterday or today. It came on feed, but it was asking one of the book club members asked if people are put off when there's romance storylines in a crime book or in a mystery. And I only saw when the post had been written quite early. There was only a few comments, but there was a kind of mix of kind of comments saying some people are put off, but I think the majority like, as long as it's not too prevalent, like kind of the romance element. And I think you need to, as well as telling a story, you've got to get people to kind of understand your characters. And I think the best way to do that, isn't it, is to know about their personal lives.
Yeah, and I think even if it's not romance, then at least perhaps some romantic tension.
Yeah,
Typically the the two characters who you wonder if they're ever going to get together.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That can be quite interesting, can't it?
Yeah,
Like
I've
in
done
the
that in a
Strike
couple of my
novels.
books. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just going back to a few comments now, we've got Leslie Lloyd, who's one of our very prolific members who reads lots and lots. And I'm sure, Leslie, you would enjoy Ben's book. She says she loves good emotional content in books. Sam again says that she's not put off by romance. She likes realism and wants to get to know the characters and feel a connection. A couple of our earlier discussions, I think Donna probably said this about the same time I covered it. Donna Morfitt is saying that book festivals, a few cozy crime authors hate that term and prefer traditional. That I literally, great minds think alike, Donna, because I think I said that just before I saw your comment. Good news for you, Ben. Donna also says that eco thriller is a new up and coming genre, so she thinks that you're actually way ahead of the game. So that could kind of bear fruit in the near future if Donna's comment there is accurate.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm not. Yeah, I think certainly the eco-themed books is definitely becoming quite big. I'm sure you probably heard of the Overstory that's probably become the most successful. It's literary fiction and quite
Yeah,
complex. But there's also the dystopian science fiction, the Ministry of the Future. That one was a really big book. So
so you might get your Amazon category yet then.
yeah, I may do.
A few other comments we missed, so let's have a quick look. Um, Laura Hamilton is saying hello to us both. She's read Who Killed Miss Finch. Thank you very much, Laura. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And she said she hasn't read yours, but yet, so she will soon. Hopefully. Who's that? Mills Pixie is saying hello to us both. Any other questions we've not answered? Donna says, of course, it's accurate. When I was saying, I hope her prediction is accurate about eco thriller. And she says, of course, it's accurate. I think we're up to date with the comments there. But yeah, I think it's really kind of interesting how we can kind of get pigeonholed. Like I've said before, that I'm currently finishing off the latest in the Edward Chris series, and yes, Donna, it is out soon. Don't worry. But then I wanna write, and I've started kind of planning to write a rom-com for 2023, and I think it's important that we get to kind of write and read, both as writers and readers, in as many different genres as possible.
So you're planning to move into a different genre?
Well, no, I would still. I mean, to be fair, kind of cozy mysteries, I don't think are a world away from rom-coms anyway, and I certainly wouldn't be leaving those. But I am planning on writing a couple of rom-coms as well in the next couple of years.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, good stuff.
What I was going to ask about yours is quite a few authors, including myself, write series. Do you think you would ever do a follow-up, or you would kind of make this character into a series character, or do you think it was a purely one-off story?
Definitely yes, because and without giving too much away, there is an open-ended ending to Green Shoots. So some things are resolved and some things aren't. And I'm not necessarily going to write a sequel to this story, but I do like John Adamson's character as the sort of award-winning crime journalist who is quite anti-authority and often goes undercover and digs very deep to get to the truth, and doesn't take no for an answer, and kind of pushes down the doors and uses any means necessary in terms of contacts to sort of try and find out what's really going on. I love those characters, and I think those are the heroes of the world, many of them. Investigative journalism is under threat in many countries, and increasingly kind of squeezed by economics and sort of squeezed out by enormous amounts of just PR and advertising. And I don't want to go off on one here, but I think I very much relate to that character. I definitely had the girl with the dragon tattoo in my mind, and the journalist in that. I don't know if you read that series. I think that's a great series, and there's two characters: the hacker investigator, and then there's the male journalist who's a bit older, who's just lost a court case. And I think those kind of characters, the man on the quest for the truth against the odds, and often having dark forces trying to stop him from getting there. And it doesn't need to be a man either, by the way.
No, of course.
So I think that's kind of an obsession of mine, and I know that if I do write another book, which I think I will, I do need to be obsessed by it. I mean, I've always been very passionate about eco issues, and obviously I've lived in South America, and I've lived through grief, and I realized that I sort of harnessed all the things that were important to me when I wrote Green Shoots. And if I write another, which I'm already planning, it's got to be dealing with issues that I think are important without cramming them down people's throats. I think that's very important as well. And I hope that people who read Green Shoots don't feel like they're sort of reading an Extinction Rebellion manifesto or something like that, because obviously the story and the mystery is the heart of it, and it's against the backdrop that I try to present it in a sort of documentary way. Just, this is what happens, and it does. The central theme of Green Shoots is eco activists being targeted, killed, hurt, threatened by corporate forces, and it happens. And an average 4 environmentalists a week are killed around the world. And that I wanted to sort of use that backdrop to create a story out of it.
What's really interesting from what you've said, which I think is a good discussion point, is the reason why, as authors, why we write. So you've already talked about. I think kind of writing the book was kind of quite cathartic for you, kind of in your own grieving, and also you've talked about wanting to kind of raise awareness of issues and investigative journalism. But it doesn't seem like you've used the word "if" a few times. It doesn't seem like you're kind of rushing to kind of get loads of books out and kind of make a kind of maybe full-time career as an author. Like as soon as I had like a series of books kind of already planned when I did my first one, and I'm kind of trying but failing to make this a kind of full-time career so I can give up my job eventually. But that, I'm not sure if that is necessarily one of your goals, is it? Like you don't seem to have like a timeline or deadline to write a second book.
I don't think I had. I think my first goal was to write that first novel, and the
That
second
story,
goal was
yeah.
to get it published. And I've got a whole sort of synopsis forming in my mind of another book, but I'm I'm a typical man. I can only do one thing at once. And I did start sort of thinking about starting to write the next book, and then I got very totally caught up with promoting Green Shoots, and I realized I simply can't do both at the same time.
No, I know.
And I am in awe of people who churn out good quality books. I mean, I think a lot of people can churn out slightly substandard, homogenous stuff. But I think if you can churn out, really good quality books one after the other, and average writing one per year, I mean, I think that's incredible going. I
Yeah,
think,
and as well, it's hard to balance with real life. So I've spoken before and said I'm a teacher like virtually full time, and it's half term next week, and I'm using that week to try and finish my final draft of my next book, 10 Green Bottles. I mean, I have been working on it slowly in the background, but with work and other stuff, you don't always get that time. So I'm going to have like a dedicated week, but it just goes to show, doesn't it? We also have bills to pay, and kind of real life gets in the way sometimes, doesn't it? I think.
well, that's why, unlike for many other people, lockdown was actually a gift to me in some way, and in many other ways not. But it gave me a lot of time that I simply didn't have. I mean, I'm a single dad, being widowed. I've got two children to look after
Yeah.
on my own, which is very time consuming. It's not it's not the best adjective to describe my parenthood, but
No.
as
Just remind us, Ben. I know you told me when we met a few weeks ago, but just remind me how old your kids
well,
are.
they're teenagers now, so
Yeah.
I mean, they're both out tonight. They've got more social life than I have, so things have let up in some ways, but teenage angst and lockdown is not a nice combination. So it's definitely been a
I'm
challenging
sure there's
couple.
lots of people watching this who can imagine. I know Sam in the background has got kids kind of that kind of age as well, and I'm sure there's lots of other people watching who could definitely sympathise with you there. The lockdown thing is interesting, isn't it? Like I finished my final draft of Miss Finch in lockdown, and even though I was working at the time, I was teaching at home, so I wasn't travelling, and I gained that time. And I've heard a few authors say as well that if you're an author, like lockdown really was kind of a bit of a gift, wasn't it? And for readers as well. I mean, certainly during lockdown, I kept seeing articles about like reading figures increasing and sales of books increasing, and I think that's another reason when I was saying before about luck, like publishing around the same time as Richard Osman and my genre kind of being popular. I think another kind of element of luck was I was publishing in lockdown when books were kind of very popular because we were all stuck indoors.
Definitely. Can you just hold that thought, Peter? I've got a sore throat and I really need to get some more water.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll just go through a couple of the comments
Okay.
while you're doing that. So yeah, no problems.
Hello.
So um, Sam is nodding along about the
I was
teenagers thing.
nodding along about the teenagers in
Oh, you're there.
lockdown,
Hello.
definitely. Hello. I did say I'd come in if one of you disappeared. Talk to me about Death in a Deck Chair. You've barely discussed it tonight, and it is insanely good. So when is it
Thank you.
released?
Well, I've done lots of these before, so I wanted to really try and chat to
I
Ben
know,
about
and you're
his.
an absolute sweetheart, and we love you. But come on, promote your book.
Okay, so just a reminder, my very first book and the one you most like to see around is Who Killed Miss Finch.
It's
So
behind
I
me on
write
the
these.
shelf.
So I write these kind of traditional / cozy mysteries in a little fictional seaside village, where there is a school librarian who has anxiety, who really loves kind of traditional murder mysteries, and he always gets roped into solving them. My latest one is just a little short one. It's a novella, so about coming on for a quarter to a third of one of my normal books in length. And it is definitely.
But it doesn't half pack as much in as a full one.
No,
It
I know a
packs
few
punch.
people, because I've not released a full one for quite a while, and a few people, yourself and Donna included, who's here, have said that it kind of just went too quick.
It did, but it's kind of set over the course of like an hour-ish, so it had to go quick. I'm going to disappear and let you carry on now, but finish what you're saying and then...
Okay, will do. Oh, thanks, Sam. And I think, I don't know any other kind of authors watching, I think when you write a novella, you need to condense it down somehow. So my last novella, so my novellas are, I was just saying, Ben, are somewhere between a quarter and a third of my normal novels. And my last one I wrote, The Mystery of Jackson King, is actually one of the ones that brings in Beachy Head that we were talking about before, where a chap has been found at the bottom of Beachy Head, and his wife is absolutely convinced that it's not suicide and it must be murder. And Edward Crisp, our detective, gets roped into helping to solve it. That's the one I'm talking about at the minute. And because that was a novella and about a quarter length of a book, I didn't have the usual kind of array of suspects that I normally would have. It was just this one plot line, and there was only a couple of suspects. And then Death in a Detector, that I was just talking about now, that has got a range of suspects, but it's just a group of people locked in a room almost in real time, like over an hour. And I think when you're writing in that condensed word length, you've got to sacrifice something that you have in the book. So in the first novella, it was kind of having a large cast of characters, and in the second novella, it was kind of putting it into this kind of short time period and not over a long space of time. I don't know if you've ever kind of written anything shorter, Ben, any short stories or novellas or anything like that.
I haven't. I went straight for the jugular. I skipped short stories and went straight for the novel. But yes, I mean it's an art form in itself, and yeah, it must be quite satisfying to have a complete story, but in a shortened length. Definitely.
Yeah. Oh, Donna's very kind, saying it wasn't any less brilliant. Oh, thank you, Donna. But she's saying it's because we're waiting for the new one and it's been so long. Yes, I know. Thank you for being patient. Going back to the lockdown thing, Laura Hamilton is saying she remembers stood in the queue for Asda in the first lockdown. God, it seems so surreal now, doesn't it? That we were all like queuing across supermarket car parks, keeping 2 meters away from each other. So Laura was reading her book in that queue. That's definitely good use of the time, Laura. A question from Donna, Ben. Donna says, are you glad that you aren't still a journalist with all the crazy goings on in the UK?
Yeah, I mean, I've been a political hack my entire life, but I think I found the last 6 years the most challenging ever, really. And it just seems to be getting worse. And then today we're hearing that Boris Johnson may be on the way back. Let's not get into politics, because
no.
But
an interesting kind of discussion point from that, and also just referring back to lockdown, is how much do we bring kind of real life, like in terms of what's happening in real life in the background, into our books. So a lot of authors have talked about this before, that we all had a decision to make when writing books during lockdown. Do you recognise lockdown or not? So I decided completely not to. So I think I might have made a couple of passing references to it in later books, as in a brief reference to kind of having to isolate last year. But otherwise, I've kind of stayed away from it. And it's interesting, isn't it, because some people read books for escapism. So I thought, I'm not going to, unless it's a plot line, I didn't want to kind of get bogged down in explaining lockdown and having people isolating and so on.
I think most authors have just ignored him
Yeah.
and set it in normal time, so to speak. I guess we'll start seeing some fiction that's very much, COVID or post-COVID. But I think the overwhelming, in fact, I remember us talking about this on the Curtis Brown course. The overwhelming feeling from the agents was everybody's sick of that. So actually, anything to get away from it is good.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a few books where it's the actual plot line. I read a rom-com, I think it was called Loving Lockdown or something like that, where it was an apartment block in London, and they were all kind of all had to isolate together in various flats. But I think unless it's part of the plot, I think it's best to kind of leave it to one side. Oh, we've got a question, Ben, from Leslie Lodge is asking what your day job is, what your current job is.
I have two different jobs at University of Brighton. I used to be a journalism lecturer, and
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
For the last few years, I've taught English to international students. I also teach a bit of writing, study skills, culture, and I also do some sort of blog editing and marketing for the university. So I do a few different jobs. I cobble together a living from various sources.
God, that's just reminded me of something we've not talked about yet. We mentioned in the preview. So, Ben, I know you're also a musician, which you're very free to talk about, but specifically, you did a whole soundtrack to this book, didn't you? Which I think was a really kind of original concept. So, do you just want to tell us a little bit about the soundtrack to Green Shoots?
Yes. Well, I mean, as somebody who went through grief and was widowed, I have expressed it in various ways over the years. I did quite a few newspaper articles about it, and then a few years ago I did start writing quite a lot of songs that were about sort of healing in particular, and getting through difficult times, and missing somebody you've lost. And I put together a collection of songs that were very much on that theme of the internal dialogue of John, of sort of getting through grief. The lead track on it is actually called "Time Heal Me."
Okay.
So yes, I've had a couple of albums on Spotify for a few years, but I also sort of packaged some of these songs together in a soundtrack. So there is a Green Shoots soundtrack on Spotify, iTunes, etc.
Oh yeah, I was just going to ask that. So anyone that wants to listen to the soundtrack or any of your other music, you can get it on on Spotify or the streaming providers then?
Yes, you can.
Okay. That's such a. I remember you telling me. I remember it's such a great idea to do like a soundtrack that accompanies the book. And certainly anyone that's read the book already or is in the middle of reading it, I think listening to that soundtrack as well, I think would certainly enhance your experience. We've got a few more comments. So talking about kind of including lockdown, Leslie mentioned that Ellie Griffiths and Catherine Ryan Howard both covered lockdown well, and Donna having another great minds think alike moment, but with Leslie this time, says that Ellie Griffiths included lockdown and she wanted to be true to her timeline. Yeah, I think that's definitely an interesting one. Sam's saying that Sarah Bonner's excellent book, Her Perfect Twin, touches on lockdown, but in a hands-off sort of way. It has a feeling of it, but uses it so successfully. I mean, that's great to hear from those authors. I think I wasn't kind of brave enough to tackle it fully. And like you say, depending on what you're writing, it can kind of, unless it's part of the plot, I think I would rather kind of focus on kind of just kind of normal life, what's happening. And hopefully we never find out and never get those days again.
I mean, I think in some ways maybe it's been easier to do with comedy. I can't remember what the name of the series was with David Tennant, where they were communicating with each other over Zoom and then having arguments, and
oh yeah,
that worked really well. I think the sort of black comedy worked quite well over lockdown with Zoom. And you have no authority here, Jackie Weaver. That kind of thing.
As we're getting to our last few minutes, There was a question.
Stage, yes.
Oh, stage, Sam says, yeah. Sam asked a few minutes ago, and we kind of were talking about something else at the time, but she was asking what we were both reading at the minute. So I'm not sure if you're reading anything at the minute, Ben.
I've started I've been reading all. I've forgotten the name of it. Is it Orphan Black?
Orphan Black.
Yes, I've been reading Orphan Black, but I haven't got very far yet.
Was that a Netflix series as well? I seem to remember.
I think it might have been, yeah. And I also wrote. I also read I Am Pilgrim recently.
Oh, yeah.
For the second time, but with quite a few years in between. And
Yeah.
wow, that is something, I Am Pilgrim. I mean, it's about 900 pages long, but it's an absolute tour de force. Absolutely. If you love sort of international political espionage thrillers, I think it's one of the best. I was absolutely gobsmacked. I thought to myself, there's no way I could ever achieve something of this magnitude that he's created. But yeah, it was great.
And we've kind of demonstrated our own point from before about reading lots of different genres and not just necessarily crime. Because I'm reading, after watching the Lord of the Rings series on Prime, I decided to reread the Lord of the Rings trilogy because I've not read them since I was a teenager. So I'm currently rereading Lord of the Rings. So neither of us are reading crime books at the minute.
Yeah, Lord of the Rings, I always remember lots of people in my class were sort of racing to get to the end of it when, as a sort of competition thing, when I was about 11, 12 years old. And yeah, it's wonderful memories. We're being thanked for our hour. Are we actually sort of wrapping up? We're just
about
to wrap up?
You've got Donna and Leslie both agreeing with you that they loved I Am Pilgrim. Leslie says it was a slow start, but a very clever plot. And yes, Sam is thanking us for our hour. So just to say, I've done a few of these before. Ben, it's your very first one. And just to say, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to chat to you and really kind of well done on the launch of your book. And I just want to end by saying it's been such a privilege to hear your story in the last hour. And just to say, as a kind of single dad and a widower and telling this story, I think it's so inspiring. And it's been such an honor to kind of hear that and to see kind of the finished product of the book at the end of it. And hopefully you do carry on writing and we get lots more books from you in the future as well.
Thank you, Peter. I appreciate that. It's been very nice to be on here, and obviously you've achieved a lot more than I have so far with so many more books and the sales, and it's really nice, and you've been giving me some really good advice, which is much appreciated too.
Oh,
it's nice to feel part of a community of writers and readers,
Yeah, that's been one of my favorite things about since I became an author. All the wonderful people I've kind of met online through here and kind of other book groups and Instagram and other authors. That's been one of my favorite parts of it, and it does feel like a community, which I really love. And thank you to Sam and all the admins as ever, because this group is such a godsend. So thanks very much, Ben. Thanks to Sam and to everyone at UK Crime Book Club. Thanks to everyone who's joined us this evening for all the comments and questions. And we will see you all again very soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.